What's up, my comic comrades? Today we're breaking down the history of Arkham Asylum, which has become one of the most popular insane asylums / prisons in all of fiction. The prison is such an important part of Batman's mythos that there's an entire game franchise named after it, dubbed the Arkhamverse. Those games, of course, include Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, Batman Arkham Origins, Batman Arkham Knight, and this year's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. The new Suicide Squad game doesn't have Arkham in the game's title, but it will be part of the Arkhamverse nonetheless. The point is, Arkham Asylum is a pivotal aspect to the Batman universe. So today we're going to talk about its origins and dive into some of the DC stories it's played a big role in. With that said, let's kick this pig. Arkham Asylum first appeared in Batman 258 in October of 1974. It was created by Dennis O'Neil and Irv Novick. The first mention of it is on page 7 in the first panel, with us seeing it for the first time in the third panel of the same page. I do want to note, however, that in its first appearance it was called Arkham Hospital rather than Arkham Asylum, as we see via the entrance plaque, though it was often referred to as Arkham Asylum. We are then taken inside Arkham Asylum, where we see it's holding Batman's villains such as Two-Face and the Joker. We also see Two-Face escapes Arkham before ultimately being defeated once again by the Caped Crusader. Anyway, Arkham was implied to reside somewhere upstate. But once Batman 326, written by Len Wein, came around, we see it's now deep in the suburbs of Gotham, as seen on page 15 of the issue, with the caption saying, and a short while later, deep in the suburbs of Gotham City at the Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane. Batman issue 326 came out in 1980, but it wasn't until 1985 when Len Wein would write Arkham Asylum's fictional history, finally giving us the origin or backstory of Arkham Asylum in Who's Who in the DC Universe issue 1, page 23. Not only did we get a breakdown of Arkham Asylum, we would also see the blueprints of Arkham, as well as seeing the plaque on the building now saying Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane. Now that's how it all began for Arkham Asylum, and before we break down Arkham's comic book origin and Who's Who in the DC Universe issue 1, I know you're wondering where I got this glorious shirt. Well, this Bat-tastic shirt is made by the good people at Roosevelt's. We actually introduced them to you a couple of weeks ago with their Star Wars collection, but they just sent over several shirts from their DC line, and they're freaking awesome. Roosevelt, spelled RSVLTS, makes all kinds of unique licensed and unlicensed lifestyle apparel. And I'll say it again, they are some of the most comfortable shirts I've ever worn. These are just a few of their Batman designs, but they have a ton of great DC gear available online at roosevelts.com/variant comics, along with collections for Marvel, Universal, Nickelodeon, Star Wars, and more. In fact, Roosevelt's is dropping a batch of new items for their Star Wars line during San Diego Comic-Con this week, so you'll definitely want to check those out. So jump over to roosevelts.com/variant comics and add some Roosevelt's gear to your lineup. Then at checkout, use promo code variant comics to take 20% off your first order. You're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna read to you verbatim out of the comic, as its origin write-up isn't all that long. The comic says, situated on a wooded acre of land just north of Gotham City, Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane has had a long and checkered history. Founded in 1921 by Dr. Amadeus Arkham on a parcel of land deeded to him by his mother, who had herself been victim of mental illness. The asylum was the first such facility of its kind in Gotham County. Dr. Arkham, a vigorous social reformer, had been appalled by conditions in the Gotham penal system, where those who were not mentally responsible for their actions were incarcerated side by side with hardened career criminals. And he was determined to improve this situation. To that end, he transformed his ancestral home into a high-security mental facility and staffed it with some of the most prominent psychologists and physicians of the time. Ironically, one of Arkham's first inmates was one Mad Dog Martin Hawkins, who had been arrested and tried for the brutal murders of Amadeus Arkham's own wife and infant daughter, then found not guilty by reason of insanity. It is to Dr. Arkham's everlasting credit that he treated Hawkins with great concern and compassion right up to Hawkins' accidental electrocution 2 months after his incarceration. Accidental. Right. In 1929, 6 days after the now legendary stock market crash, Dr. Arkham, who had lost his entire fortune in the crash, apparently went berserk and was subdued and arrested while attempting to electrocute his former stockbroker. You see what I'm saying? He wants to electrocute his stockbroker, and it's an accidental execution with Hawkins, his wife and daughter's murderer. Sure, buddy. Sure. Anyway, found not guilty by reason of insanity, Amadeus Arkham was committed to his own asylum, where he spent the remainder of his days carving indecipherable inscriptions on the floor of his cell with his fingernails while softly singing the battle hymn of the Republic. Amadeus Arkham passed away quietly in his sleep on April 7th of 1963, a faint smile etched forever on his lips. Since Dr. Arkham's incarceration, his asylum has had a series of state-appointed administrators. And just like that, you have the origin of Arkham Asylum. This same origin story was was used almost exactly in Arkham Asylum Serious House on Serious Earth, a graphic novel written by Grant Morrison. It was basically just expanded upon with greater detail on things. For instance, we learned that Mad Dog raped Amadeus' wife before killing her and dismembering her body. Despite this horrific tragedy, Arkham Asylum for the Criminally Insane officially opened that November, and Amadeus Arkham insisted on treating Mad Dog personally. He would treat Mad Dog for 6 months, at which point Amadeus was like, yep, it's time for revenge, and strapped him onto an electroshock table and deliberately electrocuted him to death. Arkham staff treated the death of Mad Dog as accidental, but it contributed to Amadeus Arkham's slow descent into madness, which he began to believe was his birthright. Long story short, as I already said a minute or so ago, Amadeus would become a patient in his own asylum after he tried to kill his stockbroker in 1929. He would end up dying there a prisoner, scratching the words of a binding spell into the walls and floor of his cell with his own fingernails. So you see what I'm saying? It's the same origin, just given to us in greater detail. Essentially, Grant Morrison knows, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there you have it, Arkham's origin. Now, this is the point in our History of episodes where we would usually give you an overview of some of the characters' story arcs. But we can't necessarily do that with Arkham Asylum, as it's a place and not a character. And to be quite frank, almost every Batman story has Arkham in it at one point or another. But we can briefly tell you some of the stories that highlight Arkham more than others, and mainly feature characters breaking out of it. Clearly, you have Arkham Asylum Serious House on Serious Earth, where Grant Morrison expands Len Wein's iconic Arkham history and origin. So let's start with the very first Arkham breakout from Batman 400. In the first 7 pages of the issue, we see Arkham Asylum and several of the inmates that currently reside inside of it, such as the Joker, Black Mask, Killer Croc, Clayface, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, the Penguin, and more. But all of a sudden, an explosion happens, blowing a hole in the wall, allowing all the inmates to escape. We see them breaking out on page 7 with their costumes hanging in trees, waiting for them in the woods. As the issue goes on, we learn it's actually Ra's al Ghul who set the explosion, breaking out all of Arkham's inmates. The kickoff to the Nightfall storyline also heavily features Arkham and another breakout. In Batman 491, Bane uses a rocket launcher on page 10 and 11 of the issue to blow holes through Arkham. The Joker then proceeds to open all the cells and chaos ensues, with Bane being the crux for the inmates escaping Arkham Asylum yet again. Next up, we have No Man's Land issue 1. If you're unaware, the No Man's Land story takes place after a massive earthquake hits Gotham and it's declared a disaster zone and closed off to the rest of the world. It's one of the best Batman stories in my opinion. If you haven't read it, read it. Maybe eventually we'll do a pull list episode on it. In any case, issue 1 of the series features the head of Arkham, Jeremiah Arkham, descendant of Amadeus Arkham. More on him later. Anyway, he decided to let the inmates of Arkham out, as we see on page 23 of the issue. Why did he do this, you ask? Well, because he decided to get the heck out of town, and with a natural disaster in Gotham's hands, it was shut off from the rest of the world, meaning it has limited resources. So if you kept them locked in their cells like animals, they would starve to death as all of Gotham was going crazy. The problem is, letting out Gotham's worst isn't going to make the disaster better. In fact, it only made it worse. But staying on the trend of Arkham breakouts, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's first issue of Batman from the New 52 literally kicked off with inmates breaking out of Arkham. Said Criminally Insane include Killer Croc, Professor Pig, Scarecrow, Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, the Riddler, and more. This installment has Nightwing disguised as the Joker to try to contain the situation. Now, I couldn't talk about Arkham in comics without mentioning the time Arkham Asylum was destroyed in Batman Eternal issue 30. Following its destruction, Bruce Wayne allowed Wayne Manor to temporarily be turned into the new Arkham facility. That's right, this all went down in 2014's The New 52 6-issue miniseries titled Arkham Manor. But it gets better than that. Once Wayne Manor has been transformed into the new Arkham facility under Jeremiah Arkham, a bunch of murders start happening within the asylum. So Batman, of course, needs to figure out who the heck is killing people in his own home nonetheless. And he does this by going undercover as an Arkham Manor inmate by the name of Jack Shaw, which we see at the end of issue 1. It's a really good, concise read, one of my favorite things from the New 52. Now, earlier I promised to explain more about Jeremiah Arkham, and like the Joker, I'm a man of my word. Jeremiah Arkham is the nephew of Amadeus Arkham. Jeremiah always knew that one day he was destined to take over for his uncle as the head of Arkham Asylum. And eventually that came true, because as you know, Amadeus went crazy and eventually died. Jeremiah then took over for his uncle and demolished the asylum before rebuilding it with new state-of-the-art systems to keep Gotham's criminals contained, as seen in Arkham Reborn issue 1. We even see Bruce Wayne, District Attorney Kate Spencer, Commissioner Gordon, as well as Jeremiah's head of security Aaron Cash and Assistant Director Alice Sinner at the small preview visit, with Jeremiah Arkham showing all of them the new facility. But with all that said, friends, it's now time for some reading recommendations. Check out Arkham Asylum Serious House on Serious Earth, Batman 400, Batman No Man's Land, Batman 258, the Nightfall storyline, the Arkham Reborn 3-issue miniseries, and of course, Arkham Manor. Those are just a few to get you all started. And that's going to bring today's episode to a close, but if you enjoyed this video, check out this one right here, and if you like all of our content, like, subscribe, and comment. It always helps us out. But other than that, I'll see you all next time when I talk about all things comics.